Hello. So I want to share some of the thoughts on how I deal with my own anger. I think the first step in that is just recognizing and admitting that there's anger and seeing that I don't enjoy it and that I want to get rid of it. It's a state of mental suffering. And so being angry is miserable. Do I really want to hold on to my misery? And do I want to be free of it? I remember Venerable saying something like, imagine never getting angry. And that really caught my attention. It stuck with me. Can you imagine that? Never being overcome by the afflictions, never having to succumb to those kind of mental states. And yet we hold on to our afflictions and justify our own suffering. So in order to find release from samsara, we need to release our grasp on samsara and stop clinging to our own suffering. We have to let go of our mental afflictions. So imagine someone is yelling at you or criticizing you. They don't even have to be yelling at you. They could just be criticizing you or something you did. And imagine just hearing it without getting defensive. Just thinking about whether it's true or not and without defending yourself. And just even if they're going off the handle at you in an inappropriate way and with something that just boils down to their own anger, just take it in and just listening without taking offense, without responding with angry thoughts like, I don't have to put up with this. I'm not going to take that. Who do they think they are? None of that. Just staying calm and seeing their suffer and rather just like, wow, this person is really unhappy right now. And what can I do that will be beneficial? What can I do that won't make things worse? And could be helpful rather than harmful. So that's how I'd like to be able to respond to a situation. Seeing the other person suffering and doing my best not to feed into it and not to develop a suffering mental state myself. Hopefully responding in a beneficial way. The Buddhas don't get angry not for a second. They're totally free from all afflictions. And wow, it'll be great to be a Buddha. It'll be good. So seeing the anger in that way, seeing that I don't want to be angry, admitting the anger, that's the first step. But we all know that it's hard to get a handle on anger even then. And Buddhism has many ways to train our minds in this. And there's different techniques for different situations, different methods for different people. If I'm upset, maybe just irritated at something, like an example of, let's say I'm putting away the dishes and I'm coming across a lot of dishes that aren't clean and having to put them back in the dirty dish pile. So rather than getting upset and letting my mind go to anger and suffering mental state of resentment towards having to redo something that someone else was supposed to do, I could just put the dishes in the dirty pile and accept that it's not a big deal. It's less important than what's going on in my mind. And sometimes for me, thinking that, I can just say, this is not that important. And that's enough of an antidote for me sometimes. It's less important than what's working on my own mind. And that works for little stuff. But and when we get our perspective straightened out, then we can see how much of what we get upset at so easily is little stuff that's not that important. I think about, I've been circling in cyclic existence since beginningless time and had all kinds of different experiences. And I'm sure each of them seemed very important at the time. And I don't remember them, And likewise, what seems so important today, most likely I'm not going to remember that in my next life. It's not going to be that important. But only the karma I create in relation to that experience or the people and beings I'm interacting with, that will be significant in my next life, in the future lives. A dirty dish, not so important. Mental state, very important. So when I'm confronted with a situation where someone is being rude to me or throwing their anger at me, I try to consciously choose my response rather than just going to my habitual default. And it's taken me quite a long time to be able to find a brief moment to like stop and look at my situation before I verbally or physically respond. It's an important thing to do, but I don't always manage to do it even now that I feel like I have the capacity to do that sometimes. And I used to never do it, so there's progress. Usually I just go fire off on automatic and respond before I even have assessed the situation. I'm often not aware of what's going on in my mind, way too often. It's like driving a car without looking at the road when we're not aware of what's going on in our mind. And this stopping for a brief moment it's very brief. It's just a matter of being aware that, oh, I'm about to do something habitually that I don't want to do. And then I can notice the affliction arising and pause long enough to try and enact an antidote. So if I find I'm reacting with anger, I can pick from several antidotes. Well, there's lots of antidotes, but I pick from several that I find work best for me. Just thinking about how I don't want to be angry and how I don't feel good about myself when I've gotten angry, like seeing these disadvantages of anger, that it's contrary to what I want to develop in my mind. That's a good antidote for me. Sometimes when I'm dealing with a person that is upset, I try to gently talk to them kindly, and ideally I do this with a genuine compassion and concern for the person, looking at their suffering. And this is an antidote of seeing their suffering and seeing that they are someone like me who is under the control of afflictions. And then I can try to go to a compassionate response. And if I can go to that compassionate response, then the verbal and physical responses flow from there. But loving kindness and compassion are things to learn right on the spot when we're angry. You have to practice this, cultivate these mental attitudes. And so it really makes me appreciate all the meditations that we have on cultivating compassion and loving kindness and seeing the kindness of others and wanting to repay their kindness. All these are really very helpful for me. And also reflecting on the importance of my desire to develop these and thinking about what gets in the way has been useful. I try to practice kindness on a regular basis. That's what I've been thinking about a lot. And it's not just doing a good deed here and there, although that's very beneficial. It's trying to have a genuine concern and compassionate attitude, a loving concern for others. And what gets in the way, of course, is the self-centered mind. And I feel a lot of change in my mind and my behavior. Another way I work with my mind to think about this is, I think this person could be a bodhisattva that's trying to give me an opportunity to work on my behavior and my mind. And I don't want to be angry at a bodhisattva. That's very bad karma. Being angry in general is a bad karma because it burns up our good karma, and it's so contrary to where we want to steer our mind. But thinking, oh, this person could be a bodhisattva. I don't know who's a bodhisattva. And so it might seem silly to some people, but I find that effective, actually. But even if they're not bodhisattva, they're still giving me an opportunity to practice try to transform my own mind, even if that's not their intention. The opportunity is there. If I want to transform my mind, I've got to use every opportunity that comes up to do that. Not just think about it later or on the cushion, but oh, here's a chance for me to do that. And another thing I found helpful is to see that sometimes I might get angry at someone over something that's behavior that's very similar to behavior I do myself. Which actually sometimes is somebody being angry at me and then I'm responding angrily. I mean, it's ridiculous. So, and even if it's not behavior that's similar to my behavior, I know there's times when I act poorly towards others. So when someone acts poorly towards me, if I think in this way, I can be more understanding towards the other person who's acting poorly towards me. We're struggling with our afflictions. We all are, on whatever level we're on. We're struggling with our afflictions. So what use is there to be quarreling and upset at each other? And thinking this way can produce a connection, a feeling of connection and commonality for me with others. And it also brings some humility into my mind. I do things that are less than beneficial to others. And I should cut other people slack. And it's good to bring this humility to the mind because I find that anger often has a element of arrogance. Why can't they do the dishes right? I'm sure I put dishes in the rack that didn't look at close enough. Well, I still have a long way to go to deal with the grosser afflictions, even to get any kind of handle on that. But I do feel some positive growth, and I find that encouraging. I used to do mechanical work on cars sometimes, and I'd come up against a bolt that just wouldn't move. And it's just like, or that I can't get it to move. It's the guy that built this car shape. Like, how do you reach in there? And so I'd get a little frustrated, and work would stall out, and I'd be getting them different tools to try and get in there, or a big bar to try and pry it, spraying the WD-40 up in there, and it would seem hopeless. And then that bolt would turn just a little bit. And once that bolt turned a little bit, I knew that bolt was going to come out. Yeah. And so even if it took a lot longer to get it out, maybe. But so working with the afflictions is like that for me too. Once I see a little progress, I'm confident that there can be great progress made in the long run, even if that's countless great eons. And it's good to have a positive attitude towards ourselves, to recognize any choice and the positive progress we do make. It strengthens my faith in the methods, in the Dharma, and that we can train our minds to develop positive and happy mental states. Although the developing wisdom, the wisdom realizing the ultimate nature is the final, real antidote to all the mental afflictions. By temporarily restraining our afflictions to these lesser antidotes, our minds will become clearer and better suited to cultivating such wisdom. As we make a little progress, our minds become more suited, better tools to make even more progress.